Hi Shreya, how are you? All fine.
Yes, so
Okay, so I guess we have completed three chapters in a sense, beginning from financial market, and then we have done the equities. We are going to do. We left with one only, that is forex. So let me just open the slides. 1 second. Money market is relatively easy to understand because it is one chapter which generally people find easy to understand given the terms are pretty straightforward, right? So let me just begin with that and probably give you a bit of information and background on this. So these are the items that we're going to cover in today's presentation, right? So introduction to money market and different money market instruments that we have. So the different uh, instruments which are there in the money market segment, right? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of money market, and what's the difference between capital market and the money market? So okay, so let's start with the financial market, so then we would be able to relate what we're talking right now. So the when you look at your financial market, so there are different market that we talked about in the first chapter, that is about the financial market landscape, right? So right now we are more focused on the two segments of the market, which is capital market and money market. So that's what is given there on the slide. So when you look at capital market is meant for raising capital for long term, right? So that is what the capital market is there for. And while you look at money market, so money market is there for the short term requirement, right? So that's the basic fundamental difference between these two markets, which again which fall under financial market, right? So the two market, one capital market, another is money market. So the money market is a market which has got products uh, under 1 year maturity. So that is the money market. So money market is broadly for maintaining enough liquidity in the market, right? So that could be another idea, or you can say that that is another thing. So how do I say, why do we say it's for maintaining liquidity? Because when you talk about banks in India, banks need to maintain a certain cash ratio as per the regulatory requirements, right? So that ratio needs to be maintained with bank, and in order to maintain that ratio, banks very as in very widely remain in this money market, because they have strong connections with their respective banks who are there in the money market, right? And they keep lending or keep borrowing money to maintain that ratio that is called cash reserve ratio. That's a word there, right? So we will talk about it as we move on. So what money is liquidity, you know this because we have also covered this in the previous chapter, so it's just a repetition. Okay, so as in when you look at the money market is no physical market, it is a part of the OTC market, right? So we discuss about two kind of a market. One is your OTC market, another is your physical market. So while you compare money markets, you would be comparing it with the OTC market, because it is more about network of different entities, right? So which create this platform for for this short term lending and borrowing. So it is more about as in this strong network of banks and various other financial institutions themselves with their connections and all. As such, there is no physical market, like if you look at your NSE, BSE, these are the physical market stock exchanges, right? So that is not the case with the money market segment. It is uh, n- more about a network of banks who are dealing with each other, right? So that is what the money market is all about. So money market is wherein, if you look at the word given to money market, it is more of a money which is readily available to the banks when they are in the requirement, or in a crisis situation, which uh, need to be met due to regulatory or statutory requirements. So that is when the money market actually money market actually helps them or acts as a savior for those financial institution in the money market segment, right? So that is how it is. Any question maybe related to money market, what we discussed so far, or maybe with the previous chapters that we have done? It is good.
No, sir, no, sir, not yet.
Okay, no
Not
worries.
with money market,
Okay.
but with other chapters I might have and ask by the end of the class.
Okay, no worries. Okay. So major players in the money market are government bodies, institution, individual, right? So these are the player which are also player in other markets, right? So players are more or less same. It's short term market. It can be for 1 day and can be up to 1 year, right? Not more than 1 year. It is only for 1 year max, and minimum it can be a day. If you talk about location, not a place, it's just a system of the banks who are connecting with each other, right? So it is part of the OTC market. How the transactions can be done with telephone, with email, right? So it's a type of a over the counter trade, OTC, as we discussed. Major player again, government, banks, financial institutions, corporates, right? Central bank, dealers, then mutual fund, foreign institutional and investors, banks. So all these are the players in the money market segment, right? So when you look at the Indian, as in the money, Indian money market, so it is divided into two pieces. One is the organized money market, then there is unorganized money market. So so there are certain banks who are there in the list of organized segment of the money market, like Reserve Bank of India, then all the commercial banks like SDFC, Axis Bank. Then there's some development banks like FICCI and IDBI. They're considered under the development bank. Then in institution, investment institution, right? Like ICC Security, HDFC Security. They are into investment banking side of the bank, right? Then there are rural banks who are actually catering to the requirement of rural India, right? And then for foreign banks like Standard Chartered, DBS, these are the foreign banks. Then there are as in there are finance corporation like Power Finance Corporation, which are the PSU segment, who help financing various projects and various important things which fall under the requirement of the government of India, or the state government for that matter. right? Then DFHI, this is they are the discount finance housing incorporation. So they are more to to create liquidity in the money market segment. So when you look at the buy and sell of the, this money market money market instruments, so this is where DFHI play a very significant role. They provide a platform to various players and investors, and they generate a liquidity. They kind of create a liquidity in the market. So DFHI more from that uh, point of view, wherein they are responsible for building the enough liquidity in the market. Okay, then you when you look at the unorganized market, the indigenous banker, domestic money, then nidhis and chit funds, traders and friends, brokers and dealers. So all these are there in the unorganized segment of the money market. So indigenous bankers are like the one who are not you know who are not authorized by the Reserve Bank of India, but they sort of start their own um, system of lending and borrowing. So they are not recognized bankers, but they deal into lending and borrowing. So they are called the indigenous banker. Domestic money is more about, wherein the money which is being invested in domestic cooperative banks and all, which are there in the rural India or in other parts of India also, cooperative banks. So which is just a domestic money which is invested in domestic sectors only. Nidhi and chit funds are like, if you remember, there was a the Sahara group was running one scheme, and there was one in Kolkata which was very famous. I do not remember, chit fund case, which are also featured in a corruption case and all. So these kind of schemes which are called chit funds or nidhis, right? So the rest already, so I'm not going to explain the other two. Okay, so then when you look at the market, so these are the products that we have got, right? Call money market and bill market, no. Then you've got the bill market, which is for 364 days CDs and CP. So this is what we're going to talk about in the subsequent slide. So these are the various instruments that we have, and about them we're going to talk one by one, right? Starting with the first one, which is treasury bill, right? So these interbank lending, treasury bill, commercial paper is the same that's given here. So this is what we're going to be talking in detail now. Okay, let's starting with the interbank lending first. Okay, so what is interbank lending? So interbank is bank to bank lending, right? So one bank is borrowing money with from another bank, so that is interbank lending, right? So the various terms under the interbank lending, so like call money, notice money, weekend money, term money, and intraday money. So let's just take a quick read about these terms to understand what these terms mean. So call money is when it refers to deposit for an unspecified term which is renewed on on a day-to-day basis. Lender can call back the funds at any time, and they are repaid on the same day. Right? So the money is paid or lent. So when this money needs to be required by the institution who has lent it to another institution, so they would just make a simple call to the institution, and that money would be returned back to the institution who lent it in the first place. So that is how this call money features there under interbank lending. So it would be renewed on a day-to-day basis. If it needs it is not required to be called back, then the contract of this this money lent to the financial institution will continue be renewed on a day-to-day basis. However, the financial institution who has lent it to another financial institution requires this money, they would simply make a call to the other institution and the money would be back to them. So that is how this word call money features there, as the name call money suggests. Then you look at the notice money. Notice money is a money which is borrowed for a period of 2 to 14 days. Right? The exact number of days specified at the start of the contract, and this is the uh, this is where the term is already mentioned, as in the number of days are already given in the first place. So it is already specified for how many days the money is being borrowed, for how many days the money is being lent. So all those details would be already mentioned in the first place, right? So that is how your interbank this notice money is there. Weekend money is more about like the money which is borrowed on Friday, right? And it is paid back on Monday. So that is what the weekend money is. So it would be used for Saturday and Sundays, and this process of borrowing money would be done on Friday, right? So last day of the week with the repayment being scheduled for the following Monday is called weekend money. What is term money? Term money is again, it's for a fixed period such as week or a month, right? So that is called term money. So if there is a contract already signed for borrowing about a week or a month, so then that kind of an agreement or contract would be called term money, right? So then the last one that we have, intraday money. Intraday money is more about, it is money which is taken for a same day and returned back in the evening. So that is called intraday money. Okay. So why interbank lending? So interbank lending are done due to uh, meeting meeting the regulatory requirement. So if banks have got a regulatory requirement to meet on a daily basis, so therefore they would have to have this interbank lending to fulfill that requirement. So those requirements are called CRR and SLR. CRR stand for, like you can see there, mentioned there, CRR and SLR. Banks and institutions require funds to manage their daily expenses and withdrawal. More importantly, they need to maintain the liquidity balances per regulators, right? So that's another thing. And at the same time, banks and institutions, because if you look at banking system in India, so it is very clear how banks are able to manage their business. Is at the one hand, they take deposit from the customers or the various investors, you can say, in a sense, right? And on the other hand, they loan out that money to other investors or other customers who require either the short term money or the long term. So that is how that money is being utilized by the bank. So so the money which is put into the savings account is not bank's money. So if you have put in a 1 crore on your savings account, so how that money would be lying there, it would be keep showing, it would be keep reflecting to you in your account, but that money would be utilized by the bank for its own purpose, and that would be loaned out to the various other customers in the market. So, right. So if all of a sudden, if you want to withdraw that 1 crore, probably uh, it may create a bit of a tricky situation for the bank. So though you would be able to withdraw the money, you would be able to you know take your money back by going to the branch and doing all those necessary fulfilling those necessary requirement, and thereafter you would be able to withdraw your money from bank. But if you look at from the bank's point of view, probably the money which you put into your account earlier, that would have been used by the bank in some other places. That's quite possible. So therefore, it would have, while your action of withdrawing 1 crore rupee, which was there in account, would have caused a bit of a trouble at the bank side, right? So what the bank would be doing now, the bank would have to reach out to the other bank to have enough liquidity so that they can meet your withdrawal requirement, right? And at the same time, the banks also need to meet the other regulatory requirement like CRR and SLR, right? So bank at the moment, the CRR requirement is 4%, right? So 4%, if bank is lending 100 rupees to its customer, the 4 rupees should be of banks. The 4 rupees should be kept aside. That should not be. So they are only allowed to lend 96 of that 100, and 4 rupees they can't be allowed to lend. And now another term that is SLR. SLR is called statutory lending, ratio. So this includes cash and the other securities. You can say, so bank has, different securities with them. That can be gold, it can be, debt and all those securities. So all that should be at least 20% with bank all the time, right? So that is the SLR requirement. SLR requirement can't be less than, it can't be less than 20%. So that is the SLR requirement of the bank, statutory
Okay,
liquidity
so
ratio. Yeah, yeah.
so
But
20% is fixed for all the banks
yeah, so it is
by
decided,
RBI.
yeah, by RBI. So this is decided by RBI, but it is fixed in a sense. It is not always fixed. Fixed. You would say it can be changed, right? So, but at the moment, it is somewhere 20% only. But if bank wants to restrict the liquid, as in, the bank wants to curb the liquidity in the market, right? So they increase these ratios. So like say if they don't want to have enough liquidity in the market, so they would increase the CRR ratio. So if they make it 5%, that means you would only be able to issue 95 rupees out of 100, and 5 rupees you would have to keep under CRR. So that way the liquidity is tightened. So the bank's liquidity is tightened. That means the money floated in the market would also be tightened, and that way the inflation and all those other aspects of the economy can also be managed well. So that's the idea of maintaining these ratios, wherein bank want to tighten the liquidity in the market in order to reduce the inflation or increase the inflation for that matter. So that is when the RBI, as the central bank of India, increases or decreases these ratios to keep inflation under control. So that is how these ratios are there, right? Okay. So partly we have already covered this slide. Maturities of 1 week or less. So that is in case of interbank lending. We have already seen these 4 5 scenarios for interbank lending. So it is about the same. Overnight rate if loan is less than 1 day, right? So if the loan which has been taken is only for a day, so then the overnight rate which is published by the Central Bank of India, so that rate would be applicable, right? So that is how this rate is applicable, and this rate can be negotiated also. Though
So
RBI would
this
be publishing the rate, but basis the relations between the banks, so rate can be negotiated also. It can be reduced a bit here and there.
so all the rates are already decided by the bank.
Yeah, Central Bank of India publishes this 12 p.m. in the afternoon for different maturities. They provide this rates, right? So those rates are largely applicable for the interbank lending. Those rates are for weekly basis, also for your overnight trade, right? And for month and all. So these rates are published by the Reserve Bank of India in India. So largely, and when I say Reserve Bank of India, Reserve Bank is not deciding it on its own. It is deciding based on the quote available from the various other banks. So all the other banks are contributing in deciding this interbank lending rates. So those rates would be published by RBI, but ultimately these quotes are given by the different banks, and that is how this rate is finally decided. Okay, so then you can say, but that this rate is published, but there can be some negotiation between the bank themselves. Basis the credibility of the bank and the good relation with their sharing with each other. So rate can be here and there changed to their specific requirements. Okay, so for interbank lending and some money market instrument, interest is payable on the principal value of the instrument. Interest is paid at the end of the loan period along with the repayment of the principal. So that's very simple, plain thing mentioned there. So the principal plus the interest would be paid back when the funds are returned back to the institution. So that is how these transactions are done. So the principal amount along with the interest for those number of days, for those number of days it was kept with the financial institution, it would be returned back to the institution who lent it in the first place. This is the normal formula, right? It is P into R oblique 100 multiplied by the time. So that is how your interest calculation is done. And this actual by 360 is the we did day count convention in the fixed income chapter. So four different day count convention we saw there. It is the same. Actual by 360 is one of the day count convention. So that is what is taken here, and it is applicable in US, right? So actual by 360 day count convention is largely the one which is also followed by US market and the European market also. Just a simple example is given there. Bank makes a loan of 100 million. Duration is 15th of July to 15th October, and interest is 5.75. So the calculation given is plain simple calculation to calculate the interest. So this is your principal amount multiplied with your interest. Interest is this is 5.75 divided by 100, and then the number of days. So number of days is 15th of July till 15th of October. So how many days are there? 92 days. And conventional method is 92 oblique the actual day. Actual days is 360 is the formula. That is this formula T oblique 360. So with this the interest payable is, how much is the interest? So it is 146 or 1,46,000, or you can say 146,945, right? So that is how the interest is calculated, and this interest is applicable for 92 days. So now looking at few pros and cons of your interbank lending. So when you look at the advantages of interbank lending, it is a high liquidity. The market is very liquid, and high profitability. Maintenance of SLR is there. So maintenance of those ratios which you talked about, SLR ratio and CRR ratio is there. Safe and cheap, and then central bank is there to help all those banks operating under money market. These are your advantages, right? So these are the advantages. Liquid market, we know profitability is also there because the volume is quite huge. So as in the margin wouldn't be huge, but given the volume is huge in this market, so the profitability is obvious. Banks are able to make enough profit on a short term basis, you would say. and then the bank need to maintain SLR. So therefore the market is safe. It is a safe market, and also cheap in a sense. It's not a high margin market, so therefore it's a sort of a reasonably it's a reasonable market, you would say. Central bank is there to look after the operation. So central bank does a hand holding of those banks who are operating in money market. Then you look at their disadvantages. So uneven development, lack of integration, volatility in call money rates, right? So this is these are the disadvantages. Uneven development, when you say, so given it is not structured market, it is not as in operating in a physical environment. So the development is more about, with the advent of various banks in the money market segment. So this market is going to is increasing or developing, but the development is not even, you would say. It's not it is not even development, it's uneven development. A lot of banks are coming under, banking system, which are your some are retail banks, some are your development banks, some are rural banks supporting the rural India and all, right? So all these banks are there, and there's few banks which have come, right, over the period of few years, and same way a lot of banks keep coming under this market. So that is what is stated with the help of this statement: uneven development. Lack of integration is very obvious because there is no, uh, no physical structure like the exchange and all, so that integration is not that strong. So then the lending rates have got some volatility because of various transactions taking place. So the rates can be volatile as well. There can be change in the rate value, as it is decided by the banks along with RBI, right? So this call money rate can be changed every day, and it may be maybe a volatile situation for one bank and the another bank on daily basis. Okay. Any question as of now? Fine, good to go.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when we see this as in the trade here, this is given the trade economics. Trade economics means how a money market trade would look like, what all attributes a trade would have. So these all attributes or these all features would be there on the trade. So the trade date would be there, settlement date would be there, the price, notional amount, counterparty, trade direction, then how that interest would be calculated. For that, the formula of DCC would be there. Brokerage charged would be shown or would be given there. Final settlement amount would also be then there, and the final, as in the standard settlement instruction. Standard settlement instruction is called the the account details, where the payment is going to settle. So when beneficiary account detail or the party account detail from where the payment would be deducted and where the payment would be credited. So all those details are available in standard settlement instructions only. So all these trade features would be available on money market trade, right? The notional amount, probably I like to just explain you. Notional amount basically means the amount on which the position has been made. So if you have taken, the 10 lakh rupees as a notional figure on which you are applying the interest, so notional amount is not always necessary, is actually exchanging hand or changing hand, you would say. So it's not necessary always the notional amount changes hand. It might be just a amount which is to um, which is acting as a, as a base, or or a principle on which the transaction is taking place. So that is how the notional amount is meant there. Rest all terms we have, we know trade date, settlement date, price, all those are very simple to understand terms. So if you are not sure, probably we can talk about, otherwise I'll move on. Just an
So
example
we
give.
can,
Yeah,
yeah.
good to.
I was saying, so you, we can move on.
Okay. So there is one very overnight, overnight lending example or borrowing example is given there. So there are traders, how they deal with each other. So that is how they do deal on phone, right? There is the JP Morgan trader. Hello, need to borrow 1 billion overnight, right? Over means overnight. City trader says available at this rate. City traders quote a number, quote a rate. Then JPM trader says no, not agreed. I need at 1.95. So the last quote is 2%. So as we said, so this quote are given by the banks to the other bank. So it can be negotiated and agreed between the banks. So the bank offered 2.20 in the beginning, but later they settled for 2%. So later they agreed for 2%. So that is how the rate can be agreed later, right? So that is how this detail is given there. And economics trade economics trade date is 14th of September 2016. Notional amount is $1 million, right? And commission as in the brokerage is 0.20%, right? And the interest rate is 2%. Maturity is it is overnight. So the next day it is maturing. The 25th of November is the maturity date. Then the trade ticket number is the internal system ticket number, and the day count convention is given there. It is actual oblique 360 is the day count convention for calculating the interest applicable on the trade, right? So that is how this example is just shown, how you know how this deals happen in money market. Let's move on. Treasury bill. Okay, so treasury we know is a word which is used for US securities. So treasury bills is there in India also. That is called government securities in India, and in US it is called treasury bills. Okay, and on the similar lines we have treasury notes and treasury bonds also. In case of treasury bills, this is for these instruments are meant for a year. So these are debt instrument like treasury notes and treasury bonds. Treasury bill is also a debt instrument, and but these instruments have maturity of less than a year, right? And while the banks or while the government issue treasury bills, they are issued a discounted rate and then redeemed at par. So discounted, if the treasury bill has a face value or the par value of $1,000, like the example shown here. If the face value is $1,000, so it can be issued at $990 to the investors. And when it is matured, or at the end of its maturity, the investors get $1,000. So they are able to redeem at par value, and while they lend on the back of these instruments, they only pay 990. So you can say, in a sense, these are the instruments which are debt instrument issued by the government of the USA. So the intent is to raise money by issuing these instrument, and here the instrument issued is issued at discount and redeemed at par, right? So this is how treasury bills are there. It can be issued in denomination of $1,000, minimum of $1,000, and can go up to $10,000 or more, right? So that is how these instruments, and then they can be issued for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. So the maturity can be um, can be can be different for different instruments, starting from 1 month till 6 months. Okay, so when you look at the T-bill as a process, so T-bill is issued through a process called competitive bidding. We will talk about this competitive bidding process, how this process takes place, and so this is a kind of a process where the auction happens for the securities, and it is about the big players who buy these securities in a bigger chunk. They participate in this process, like the IPO that we discussed, wherein the institutional players give a quote, right? They give a price, and they give a price in the quantity which they're comfortable buying for a given equity which is offered to them. In a similar manner, in this process of competitive bidding, which is meant for T-bills, the institutional player are roped in, and these institutional player give their quote, or you can say the price of buying those securities, and that process is termed as competitive bidding process, and we will look at that process in the subsequent slide. But that is what the process is all about. So it is very similar to the process which we have in the IPO, and that process in other terms is also called Dutch auction process. Dutch auction is a word used for deciding the price of security. So that's applicable for the IPO process also. That's also applicable for your for deciding the price of your debt in the form of T-bills and all. This means that rather than paying the fixed interest payment like conventional bond, the appreciation of bond provides the return to the bond holder. So here, uh, if the price of the bond increases in the market, so that would be the appreciation for the bond holder also, which is applicable for T notes and T bonds also. Same for the T bills also. Okay, let's move on. So let's say you want to buy a T-bill from the US government, right? So how it would be happening? Price of T-bill is 9,800. Duration is 13 weeks. On maturity, you're going to get $10,000. So 9,800 is the discount price, you can say, right? And the maturity is 13 weeks. And on maturity, you're going to receive $10,000, which is the par value of the T-bill. Securities are issued via regular schedule auction process. Upon Treasury's announcement of size of upcoming auction, the tenders or sealed bids are being solicited, and bidders are submitted two types of bids. One is called competitive bidding, another is non-competitive bidding. So the competitive bidding is meant for big players, institutional players. Non-competitive bidding is meant for retail players. And this non-competitive bidding is like just a price which is already decided, and that price would be applicable for all the retail customers. So they would be given security on that price only. So there would not be any other additional competitive bidding. It is just the name looks like non-competitive, so there is not going to be any. It is just a non-competitive in a sense wherein already the price decided under the competitive bidding would be applicable for the non-competitive bidders, which is retail investors. Okay. Okay. So that is how. One second. Okay. A competitive bidder specifies the amount of security that the bidder wants to buy and the price that the bidder wants to pay. This is defined as terms of yield, right? So that is how. So this is how the competitive bidding happens. The amount of security that the bidder wants to buy and the price that the bidder wants to pay. Like in case of IPO, also same thing happens. The quantity, how much quantity an institutional player wants to buy, and the price they want to offer for those security is the same kind of a process, which is termed as competitive bidding in case of T-bills, right? Price of security in the auction is set based on the prices offered in competitive bids, taking the average of all accepted competitive prices. Competitive bidders are the world's largest financial institution. 80% of all treasury securities are sold to them, right? Treasury will accept the competitive bids with the highest price and the lowest interest rates and will reject other bids, right? So that is how this auction happens. So treasury means the government would like people who are buying those securities at the highest price. Those are accepted first, and the ones where the price offered to the government is less, those are rejected. Those bids are not accepted, and only the bids where the price offered to the government is higher, that is taken into consideration, and then the bids are accepted by the government for those by those players or institutions who want to buy those T-bills at the higher rate. So let's look at again this example here. Let's assume the Federal Reserve wants to issue a T-bill worth rupees 4 million. So total size of T-bill issue is $4 million. Each bid is for minimum of one T-bill, and each bid is for one T-bill, and the cap means the upper price is $1 million, and the floor price means the lower price, that is of $985,000. So there are two prices are given. One is the cap, another is the floor. So cap means it can't be more than $1 billion, right, for the one T-bill, and it can't be less than 985. So the government, right, the government is looking for the bids coming in the range of these two numbers. So which all bids the government would be interested into? The government would be interested into those bids which are priced higher. So look at this particular table there. The lowest competitive bid is accepted first. As a result, the highest bid price is accepted until the issue is sold out fully. So look at the price in A is 990,000. Then the B is 980,000 950. The C is 989 935. Then the D is 989 900. Right. So that is how the price is going to be. Right. So if the price is 990,000, so it's very clear the return would be 10,000, because one T bill is $1 billion. It was given there. One T bill is $1 billion, which is a cap price. So that's the the face value. Face value is $1 billion. So 1 billion minus this, so this is $10,000 is the return. And how do we calculate the yield? Yield is calculated by return, or as in the coupon, or you can say the return value, coupon value divided by your your price of the security. So if you divide $10,000 by this number, you will get this yield. So this is the yield percentage, as in the return percentage, you would say. This is the return percentage, and return percentage would be in this sequence. So if you go down, you can very clearly see the return is being it is being increased, right? So it's very obvious, because the price, if the price paid to the government is less, your return would be more, because this is the price which would be paid by the investors. You are paying 990,000 in the first case. In the second case, the investor is paying less. In the third case, bit further less, and then the fourth case further less, right? So that means the yield will increase as the price goes down, and therefore the government would be interested in taking those bids which are higher in price, and therefore they would have to give less yield or less interest, you can say, if the price offered to the government is higher.
So I'm
Hope
not
this is
able to
clear.
see the screen.
Yeah.
Not able to see the screen.
I can't hear you. Can you just speak a bit
So I'm
louder?
not able to see the screen.
Okay, give me a second. Screen is not visible. One second. Okay. Now is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So look, just take a look at this particular screen here. Let's assume the Federal Reserve wants to issue T bills worth rupees $4 million. Give me a second. Now see, look at this. So as we discussed, like government when issuing T bills, they have got this idea. If they are offered, right, if they are offered higher price for those securities which are being issued by them, they would be more than happy to of more than happy to offer those securities to different investors. So the price offered to them is high, so it would be good for the government, because they would have to pay lesser interest or less yield would be there, right? So the bids, as we discuss, would be accepted uh, for those whose price is high, right? So like in the cases like this, price in first case is 990, right? And then the price offered is 989, 950, right? And the price then the price offered is 989, 935, right? So if you see this, the price order, so in the first case the price offered is higher, right? So when I sell a security to you, or when I sell T-bill to you as a government, and you as an investor want to buy this T-bill, so you're going to quote a price at which price you want to buy it. So if you want to buy at 990, that is a good deal for the government, given they would have to pay less return, or compared to the other bids which are available in the table. So in the first example, you see what is the return paid is $10,000. In the second case, the return is more, $10,000, 50 rupees, right? So if the price is less, the return would be more for the investor, and the return would be more. That means the yield would be more. So that is how these terms or these things are placed in the table. So the government would be um, more happy, and they would be more inclined to offer those securities to the investor who are offering higher prices to those offered securities. So this process is called competitive bidding. This particular process of buying these securities is called competitive bidding. How much the Federal Reserve wants to issue? They want to issue a T-bill worth $4 billion. So that means they are looking for 1 million is there, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. So they're only going to offer this T-bill to the four investor, and this investor who is placed at E will be will miss out this opportunity, given he has quoted a lesser price, and therefore he would not be given this security. It would only be given to the first four investors, and with that, the entire requirement of issuing 4 million worth of T-bill would be fulfilled, and government would be done with the issuing of the securities. Okay. So the Fed will issue T-bills to client A, B, C, D as they have bid for the highest price and lowest yield. The price of security in the auction is set based on the whether the auction was discriminatory or uniform auction. So there is a one term which is given there. Price of the securities in the auction is set based on whether the auction was a discriminatory or uniform auction process. So what does it mean? So that means the price offered to the investor can be different also, like the example that we discuss here, the price offered is different. So, and there could be a process that is called uh, uniform price distribution bid. So wherein the investor might give a different quote, like they have given a different quote here in this example. Later, uh, later the government decides they want to keep it a uniform price. So uniform means they will keep a lowest price for all the investors. So that means every investor, which is in case four investors are there, right? So all the four investors are going to pay the same price. That would be the lowest price, because you cannot apply the highest price to the investor who quoted a lowest price, but you can certainly offer the lowest price to the investor who quoted the highest price. But that way, the investor who quoted the highest price would be comfortable buying security at the lowest price also, because that's a good deal rather for the investor, right? So the uniform would be, in a sense, the lowest price would be applicable for all the investors, and the security would be offered in a same manner. It would be as in it would be it would be offered equally or in the equal rate or price to all the investors. So that is called your uniform auction process. And if it is offered a different rate to different investor, then that would be called a discriminatory auction process. So these are the few terms which are applicable there, right? So that is your average yield. Average yield is just you take an average of four. Stop out price is when this is called your stop out price, where the bid is being stopped. That is called stop out price. Stop yield is again the corresponding yield to the stop out price. Like this is your stop out yield. Tail is a difference between the average yield and the stop yield. That is called the tail. So as in a difference between how much is the tail, how much is the margin, or how much is the extra. So that is called your tail compared to the average. Competitor bidder specifies the amount of security that the bidder wants to buy, the price that the bidder wants to pay, right? So this is in case of non-competitive bidder. The amount of So non-competitive bidders, a retail customer, they purchase low volumes, not sophisticated enough to submit a bid. Limits on each non-competitive bids can be set. Direct purchase of treasury security by individuals are limited in many countries. In such cases, they use the services of dealers, right? So this is in case of non-competitive price bidding, and this kind of a bidding is based on the competitive bidding only. So whatever has been decided on the competitive bidders, so that would be the price offered to the all other retail customer who want to take position in money market products like T-bills and all. This we have covered already. Auction, when the all bidders pay same price. Auction, when the bidder pay different price. Cap is the maximum price, floor is the minimum price for the issue.
So,
Yeah.
can you please again explain the competitive bids?
Competitive bidding, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the competitive bidding is like this, wherein just look at this one only. So when T-bill is offered, right? So T-bill is offered to all the institutional players, big players only. Like in case of IPO, also the same thing happens. So they will be given this option of quoting their own price, and so there would be a cap price. Cap price means that's the actual value of the security or actual price of one T-bill. So in case of this cap price, you see 1 million is the cap price. So that's the maximum price which would be offered to the investor at redemption. So redemption is a par value, as we know. T-bill has this feature wherein redemption happens at the par value, and the offered price would be a discounted price. So now there is a floor price also. The floor price here basically you cannot discount more than 985,000. So whatever price is quoted by the investors, so that has to be between these two prices only. It should be within cap and the flow, right? So then that way they are actually quoting a price which is a discounted price for them. They are going to pay less price while they buy these securities. So the investors will give their quote and the number of securities, so number of T-bills they are going to buy. In this particular example, we are seeing every investor is buying only one T-bill, one security, and they are giving their price. So how much worth of security a government wants to offer? It's a 4 million worth of security government wants to offer. Every investor is ready to buy one T-bill, which is 1 million worth of T-bill, you can say, right? So they are quoting their prices. So A is quoting 990,000 as a price for one T-bill, right? And B is quoting a bit less compared to the A, that is 989, 950, and then C is quoting again further less than B, and D is quoting further less than C. Similarly, E is quoting further less than D. So these are the prices which have been quoted by the investor, and you can say these are discount price kind of thing. If you and how this bidding process will take place? Bidding process will only consider the prices from top to bottom, and they will continue moving to the bottom as long as that criteria of selling out all those securities is not fulfilled. So as long as all those securities are not sold out, so that way that bidding will continue. So let's say there are $4 million to be raised here in this example. There are four we I need four player who are ready to take 1 million position and one in the security. So first player is taking 1 million, second player is taking 1 million, third player is also taking 1 million, fourth player is also taking 1 million worth of security. So those prices which are being quoted by them would be considered by me, and rest all prices which are quoted by the other players would would have no significance for me, because I'm not going to consider them, because those prices are lesser than the prices which are quoted by the first four player, and those first four players would be eligible for this for this T-bill auctions, and that is how this auction will take place, and securities would be offered, and this is offered a discounted rate. And then there is another thing that we discussed. It can be uniform auction process, and it can also be discriminatory auction process. So discriminatory is this only wherein price offered to all the investors are different. So that would be termed as discriminatory auction process. When the price offered is same in a sense, you take a lowest price and give the same lowest price to all the investors. So that would be called your uniform auction process, right? So that is how this competitive bidding is all about. Clear?
So, no
Yeah.
matter on how price on what prices the investors are buying, all the T-bills
Hmm.
will be redeemed at 1 million only.
Yeah. All the T-bills will be redeemed at 1 million, because the cap, as in the price of the uh, you know this T-bill is 1 million. So redemption would be at 1 million, but they are bought at the discounted price basis the price quoted by those investors,
Okay, sir.
right? Okay. So moving on. So auction process, the lowest competitive bid is accepted first, right? All competitive tenders are ranked in order of the bid yield. So highest bid, the lowest competitive bid is the accepted first. Lowest competitive bid means in the form of yield. If you are demanding less yield, so that would be called the lowest competitive bid. So the first one that we saw here, this is the lowest yield, right? So this is the lowest yield. From the yield point of view, the lowest yield would be accepted first, and the highest yield would be accepted last. Or from the price point of view, the highest price would be accepted first, and lowest price would be accepted last. Okay, so stop yield, stop out price. These are the same thing that we have discussed here. Stop yield, stop out price. So no need to further discuss it. Each competitive bidder pays the price for the security, which is determined by the yield that was bid. The average yield is the average of all accepted competitive bids weighted by the amounts allocated at each yield. So average we have discussed. Average means all the four which are there, you average them out and then you calculate. All competitive bidders pay the average yield, right? So what the non-competitive bidders are going to pay? They're going to pay the average yield. They are not going to pay they're not going to be bidding the process. They're going to just be offered one particular price, and that price would be the average price of that the bid process which has already taken place by the institutional players. Okay, so then T-bills are traded in the secondary market. So they can be sold in the secondary market. If you want to offload them, you want to redeem your money, so that option is provided, and these securities are traded in the secondary market.
So when it comes to secondary market, can we
Hmm.
get more profit out of T-bills, or it remains same?
No, you can get profit, but the profit margin wouldn't be huge because capital appreciation as such is not much there. So because the reason is very clear, these are debt securities. So debt securities are not having that level of appreciation in capital. It is more about it depends upon the interest rate only. So if the interest rate is less in the market, so then there could be a capital appreciation. Otherwise they largely trade at the same price. The only thing would be inherent the inherent that 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 interest would be carried on with those T-bills or securities which are traded. Otherwise, largely the price will remain same as long as there is no impact in the interest. We talked about the interest relation with the security price in fixed income chapter, right? So that relation works here also. If there is no changes in the interest rate of the security, interest rate means the coupon rate, right? However, in case of T-bills, there would be no coupon rate. It's a discounted, but you can easily calculate your interest in a sense. If you are getting a return of 10,000 rupees, $10,000 on 1 million security, so you can easily calculate what interest you're going to get, right? So $10,000 divided by the $1 million, so that's the interest you're going to receive on on the security. So if you can avail the interest, better interest from outside, right? So you would like to offload your security. If you offload it, so price of securities will fall. That way the security value will decrease. Similarly, the your as in the interest rate in market fall, then the price of your security will increase, and that way you can make more profit. So capital appreciation happen, I won't say it doesn't happen, but it is largely from the interest, the interest rate, which prevailing interest rate in the market going to decide the capital appreciation of the security. Otherwise it is largely traded at the same rate, you can say. So that is the reason you say the risk is less, because it is pre-decided. Okay. What is the price of treasury bill? The price of treasury bill is the price that an investor will pay for a particular maturity treasury security depend upon the investor's required return on it. Price is determined at the present value of the future cash flows to be received. Since the treasury bill does not generate interest payment, value of it is the present value of the par value, right? So assume an investor requires 5% annualized return on a 1 year treasury bill with a 1000 1 million euro as a par value. He will be willing to pay a price of, so if you want to receive a 5% return, right, on the security, so what would be the price of that security? You're going to discount it. So how are you going to discount? You will divide this 1 million by 1.05, and this is the rate is coming. So you would like to buy the security at a lesser rate or discounted rate in order to avail a 5% interest rate, right? So if an investor thinks that he wants to have a minimum of 5% interest rate, so you are going to discount the value today, and that way you would be able to figure out the price at which you want to buy that security. So like here the example given, 1 million is the 1 million euro is the par value. You divide by 1.05 as a rate, right? Because this is the forward rate or the future rate you want to, but you discount it. Discount means you divide it, and after dividing you will get this price. So this is the price you're going to offer, or this is the price you are going to pay in order to avail, 5% interest rate on the security or on the T bill for that matter. Okay. Commercial paper, this is another instrument in money market segment. Commercial paper is a promissory note, right? And for a specified amount to be paid at a specified date. This is what this commercial paper offers, and this is usually issued by large corporations, and again it is offered a discount. It can be issued from a day to 270 days, as in the maturity can be a day to 270 days. It is offered in $1,000 denomination, right? And the buyers are usually the big players only, and all entities are not allowed to issue. One condition is the large corporation, another is the corporations or the entity issuing commercial paper should have good credit rating, because this kind of an instrument is a unsecured, um, it is an unsecured
So why
instrument.
unsecured?
Yeah, unsecured in a sense, when it is offered, there is no such collateral attached to the paper. So the paper would be having, you know uh, it is offered in the name of the company only, so on the company's credibility, you can say. Company's credibility is given as a is offered to the investors, but as such there is no collateral or no asset is attached with those papers which are offered to the investors. So in that sense it is unsecured, so you would be having less security when you compare it with your bonds and all. The bonds have this clause wherein the asset is locked, or you can say attached with the bond paper. So even if there is a liquidation has to happen, so the bond holders would be given more, they would be having some sort of a surety or a sense of security that their money is secured. But here that's not the case. It's more on the credit rating or the credibility of the company. This unsecured promissory notes are offered, and investors are buying these promissory note on the, you know on the backdrop of the company's credibility, right? So here, uh, this is how, and given this is an unsecured instrument, so the interest rate offer are better compared to the bonds for sure. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So who are the institutions buying it? Mutual fund, insurance company, pension fund. These are the players who actually take position into commercial paper. Okay, then moving on. Okay, so commercial paper are also offered to public also. That can also be offered to general public, and also offered to the institutional players. Corporation that borrows less frequently sell commercial papers which are known as industrial papers to paper dealers and charge a markup and sell to investors. So that is another way of selling this commercial papers, wherein the corporation can sell these paper to an institutional player, right? And that is offered to the um, in the form of as a known as industrial paper. It is offered to the dealers in the money market, and these dealers, they apply a bit of a markup, as in they increase the amount of this paper, and they sell these paper to retail investors. And these kind of papers have a lot size of 200 to $50,000. So this is another way by which corporations raise money. They do not go to public, they do not give an option to public buy these directly, but they offer these unsecured promissory notes to the dealers, and then dealers apply some of their margin or some of their commission, and then they sell these papers to the retail investors out there in the market, and that way the dealers are able to make money, and later the corporation receives that money which is issued to the investors, or to dealers for that matter. So, and these kind of commercial paper have a bigger lot size, like of $250,000 lot size for these kind of unsecured promissory notes, which is in the form of commercial papers, right? So it's given. Most commercial paper, as we discussed in the first slide, is $1,000. There's some papers available even in the lots of 25. So there is always exception to every instrument that we have in the financial market domain. So the general trend is these are usually of the lot size of $100,000, and then there can be $250,000 when it goes in the form of industrial paper, as we saw in the previous slide, right? And there are some papers which are also offered in the lot of $25,000, right? So that's an exception, you can say, in when commercial paper offered. Then the maturity given is 1 to 45 days, 45 to 90 days, right? Some are even of 270 days, so most of them are less than 90 days only, commercial paper. So it's a short term money requirement which is raised with the help of commercial paper. Certificate of deposit is just like your fixed deposit, right? Here, the important thing is when you want to go for a fixed deposit, yeah,
So I have a doubt in commercial paper.
yeah, go ahead.
So the last paragraph is written that corporations that borrow less frequently sell commercial paper, which are issued as industrial papers to paper
Yeah.
dealers. I
Mm.
understand this.
Yeah, so this is in a sense like as in the corporation who do not do this raise capital raise in the form of commercial paper quite often or quite frequently, so they can have another route wherein they can go for this unsecured lending, borrowing rather, not lending, unsecured borrowing of money. So they can offer their paper in a bigger lot, that is called industrial papers, so that they're the lot size is to $50,000. If you look at the normal lot sizes are $100,000, but here the lot can be even a bigger in size, because they don't do this capital raise every now and then. So they can opt for the bigger lot sizes in the form of industrial paper, wherein they reach out to dealers directly, and dealers will offer these papers outside. So these are meant for those corporations who kind of don't involve in this kind of capital raise every now and then, and who have just done very less, who don't do it often, they can opt for this kind of a option. Okay, so this is another. It is the same thing. It's a commercial paper only, but they are given an option to raise money with the help of dealer by offering the paper in a higher lot size, in a higher denomination, you can say. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This we have done. Okay, now coming to certificate deposit. So certificate deposit, when you compare it with a fixed deposit, right? So fixed deposit and certificate deposit have quite similarities. Quite similarities means these are the fixed deposit instrument where you're going to receive the fixed rate of interest like FDs and all. FDs can also be opened with a lesser amount like 10,000 rupees or in India, right? And it can go up to lakhs and crores also. Here, the important thing is when you want to issue, when you want to invest in certificate deposit, it has to um, it has to have a minimum investment of $1 million in the US value. It has to it should be $1 million, right? And so that is how these certificate deposit are there, and these are especially meant for HNIs or those players who have got a lot of money with them. So retail customer might not be interested because the 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 amount required to invest in certificate deposit is quite big. $1 million does not, everyone does not have $1 million, and therefore either the HNIs, high net income, right, individuals, or you know or other institutional player who have lot of surplus money, they can invest in certificate deposit, and they get a fixed rate of return on these paper. So this is how certificate deposit looks like. This paper shown there, they are negotiable instrument that can be sold before maturity. So these are traded instrument, right? So you buy these, you put your money, you can in case of fixed income deposit, the bad thing is you cannot sell them before the contract period, right? So that is what the that is how the fixed deposit are illiquid, you could say. However, in case of certificate deposit, they are not illiquid, they are liquid. Given if you want to offload your position, you want your money back, so it is a good, it is a good in that form, in that sense. You are promised a return of maybe a 6%, 6% for a year. And if you want to offload your position in a matter of 2 months, so you would be given an interest for 2 months along with the principal. You would be able to exit the position and you're back with your money. So that is how this certificate deposit is liquid instrument compared to your fixed deposit, which is not a liquid instrument, wherein if you block your money, you'll have to be invested with that money for that number of months, weeks, or years, whichever is agreed in the beginning. And if um, you want to you know leave your as in you want to uh, run as in come out from your investment, then you will have to pay some penalties and all. So this is a formula, it's a simple formula, right? Same as we discussed earlier. 4 point day count convention is given there, right? So difference between the two term deposit is fixed deposit only. CDs are negotiable, term deposit are non-negotiable, right? Maturity is only up to 1 year. Maturity is generally more than 1 year. Easy to liquidate before maturity. Difficult to liquidate before maturity. Traded in secondary market, not traded in secondary market. Offers lesser yield, offers higher yield, right? So that's the difference between two. What is repurchase agreement? Have you heard this term repurchase agreement ever?
No, sir.
No, okay. So this is this is again another money market instrument wherein an entity has got a security. Like let's suppose there are two entity A and B. A has got some securities with it, but they need money now. They require money. So what will they do? They will reach out to another entity who is willing to lend them money on the back of a security. So they will have this arrangement wherein they would be selling the security to another entity with a promise that they will buy the same security at a later stage. So this kind of an arrangement is called repurchase agreement. So I as an entity, one entity is selling securities with the promise of buying those securities at a later date is called a repurchase agreement. So here you can see the example shown there. So seller would be, selling the security on the back of the security would be getting cash, and then he would also be, you know, he would be returning that cash plus interest in the second this one in the second diagram. You can say he's returning cash plus interest back when the contract is over, when that as in the requirement is done. So they would have agreed for a certain number of days or weeks or so. So when the contract is over, the mature as in the demand is met or requirement is met, you can say. So the seller would refund the cash which he borrowed on the back of the security, and along with that this interest would be paid back, and security will come back to the seller who did this repurchase agreement in the beginning. So one party is selling security agreeing to repurchase it in future, it is called a repo. Right? Reverse repo is for the party on the other hand of transaction buying the security and agreeing to resell in future, it is called reverse agreement. So the party which is buying the security and agreeing to resell, for that party this is called a reverse repo. In a sense you can say reverse repo is just the opposite of when you are returning the security, when you're taking the security back. Their transaction would be called reverse repo, and the repurchase would be when you are selling the security. So that is how this repurchase agreement is there.
So I read in my 12th standard that repo rate and reverse repo rate. So is it similar to
Hmm.
that?
No, 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 no. It's different. That is a rate. Here we are talking repurchase agreement. So repo rate is, that is decided by RBI. So
Okay.
that thing is different. That's a repo rate, and reverse repo rate is at what rate the RBI is going to lend money to banks. That is called repo rate, right? That is called repo rate. And what rate RBI is going to borrow money from the banks is called reverse repo. So RBI also borrow money at times, and RBI also lend money when they have quite a lot of money with them. So they lend money to the other banks, right? So these two things are different, but here this instrument is a bit different. That is not you cannot as in relate with that one. So it is a repurchase agreement. So repurchase agreement is kind of selling of security to another entity on the promise of buying the same security at a later date when the requirement is met accordingly, right? Okay, so depending on tenure, there are two types of repo agreement. One, when one is where no maturity is given, that is called open repo, and there is another which is called term repo. Term repo means where the maturity is already decided, right? So that is called term repo, and when there is no maturity decided, that is called open repo, and there it will be, as in the maturity will be keep revised every day until this remains open. So this maturity will be keep renewed. So that is how this open repo is there. Term repo is a repo with a maturity of more than one day. That is called term repo, where the term would be given for how many days or months or weeks this is going to remain open. So participant to repo is banks, money market funds, non-financial institution. A transaction can be an amount up to $10 billion. So maturity can be in the range of 1 to 15 days and can be even for a month, 1, 2, 3, 6 months, up to 6 months. These repo transactions can happen. Okay, so what it would be the as in so when this repo would be completed, so funds would be returned, interest would be paid on that fund, security would be back to the borrower. So that is how this repurchase price is the higher than the initial sale price, and the difference in the price constitutes the return on the lender, right? So this price means when he sold that security, he got a fund, that is cash, and when he is repurchasing the security, right, so that price would be higher. Why? Because you're going to pay interest. If you pay interest, that means the price would be higher. So that's the formula given how repurchase is done, right? So not going to as in talk about the formula, just simple. Give me a second, let me see how many. So it is done as in just a one, two slides are there, important one, which I'll just, one is haircut, another is, this one, difference between where it will cover all. So what is haircut? Any idea? Have you heard this term haircut before?
Yes, so I guess it is something related when, like,
Hmm.
when a company has to borrow something, and if the
Yeah.
credit quality or the quality of the collateral is low, then they
Hmm.
are given, they're given a haircut or something. And if the credit quality
Yeah.
is good, then they're
Hmm.
given a margin.
Yeah. So haircut, yeah. So haircut is a term which is applied by all the banks in lending transactions, lending and borrowing transactions. So it is uh, just to avoid their risk in future. So banks apply the haircut. So let's take a very simple, plain example to understand. So if you as a customer reach out to your bank and want to take a loan of 50 lakh rupees for buying a property, which is a home loan, right? So what a bank would be doing, bank would be first assessing the or evaluating the value of the property that you want to buy, right, on the back of the money, home loan, right? So bank evaluates the property does have a worth of 50 lakh rupees which you intend to borrow from bank. Now bank says, okay, the property does value 50 lakh, but we are not going to offer you 50 lakh, we are going to offer you only 45 lakh. And by this, the bank is applying some percentage of haircut. Why bank is doing that? Bank is going to safeguard its own interest, because bank does know the value of the property is somewhere equivalent to 50 lakh rupees in the market term, but you never know, as in the bank does not know the same will be the case in future ahead. Property value may reduce due to market uncertainties, and therefore the bank are going to apply some percentage of haircut on the property value to safeguard their interest, or to you know um, to mitigate the risk which uh, which change in value of the property may cause to the value of the property in future. So that is what the haircut mean. Haircut is broadly, you know it's a percentage, valuation percentage. There another term which is there used for a haircut, that is called valuation percentage. How you going to value the property? So that is what the haircut is all about. So that does depend upon the credit rating of a given security, Credit rating is the one aspect of determining the haircut, and also the maturity of the security. If the maturity is higher, the haircut applicable would be higher. So let's say the maturity is 30 years, as opposed to another security which has a maturity of 1 year. So the 1 year security is going to have lesser haircut compared to a security having a maturity of 30 years, because 30 years is really a long time. And in this 30 years, a lot of things may happen. So the uncertainty in a sense is higher in a security having a longer maturity. Right, so that is what the haircut is all about. So it is applicable in the investment banking also when there is any transaction happens. So the security lended, security lent out to the entity, that would be having haircut applicable on that. So that's how the haircut is there. Right. So reverse repo we have done. Repo deals are quoted as yield basis. A rate is quoted as simple interest yield on 360 days basis. This is set upon the initiation of transaction and fixed for the term repo. The when the cash, let's look at this particular example to understand the terms given there. When the cash is borrowed against the collateral, so you pledge a security and you borrow the cash. So when it is reverse repo, you take back your security and you return the cash plus the interest. So that is how these transaction complete. So this is a complete transaction now. The first leg, this is second leg where the transaction is over. You borrowed fund, you return fund, your security is back. So that is your these are the two legs of the repo transactions. Okay, that's the formula again for the reverse repo. This you can probably as in look at. What's the difference between reverse repo and repo? Reverse repo, buyer of security has the right to surrender the security at a future date. Seller of the security has the right to repurchase the security at the future date. Receiver of the fund is the lender. Receiver of the fund, the borrower. It's the same thing that we have already discussed in the explanation. These points we have already covered. So advantages: higher rate of interest, low risk, easy access, high balance requirement, limited number of withdrawals, transfers, interest rate fluctuation, and other fees. Right. So these are the disadvantages, and these are the advantages. Um, Advantages of investing in money market. Okay, let's take a final look at the last slide, which is the difference between your capital market and money market. So capital
So,
market trading, yeah.
so actually, I have a class, another class at 10.
Okay, 10. Okay, fine. So no worries. So maybe I'll say we all done. We already done, right? So you just maybe take a read through with this presentation later. If you have any question, then we can probably take up those in the
So,
next one.
in the, we are also left with the foreign exchange market, right?
Yeah, FX. Yeah, FX. I guess that's the last chapter that we are left with.
Yes, sir.
So that is the last chapter,
So,
and thereafter,
FX and yes, sir, that's it.
yeah, that's the only one, I guess. Derivative,
Yeah,
you started with Anshul sir, right?
yes, sir.
Yeah. So forex we would be doing next weekend, right? And then you are good in terms of your previous the leftover thing. So that's is completed. So okay.
So,
So
also,
yeah.
the level one mock, sir, can you assist me on what is going to come?
In level one, it covers equity, right?
Yes, sir.
Then fixed income, and your financial market, what is broker, custodian, all those terms that we covered in the financial market chapter. So that would be there, right? So various terms: regulator, broker, dealer, uh, then
Is there any numericals that are going to come up?
no, it would
Good.
mock would not have any numerical. It would be more of an interview, right? So wherein the it would be conceptually, as in, it would be conceptually as in based mock, wherein you would be tested on your as in the understanding only. It would not be having any numerical in your mocks for sure.
Okay, sir. The
Yeah,
last thing, it would be done in a group, like individual basis, right?
yeah, it is one to one.
Okay.
It would be one to one kind of an interview, as the way the idea is to prepare you for the real interview,
Yes, sir.
right?
Okay.
So that you can probably keep preparing on your own once we are done through the chapter. So because the things are as in it's not difficult, but you have to give some time to understand them. So that is the that one has to do along with this, while we are doing. So the mock actually gives you an experience of how you're going to present yourself. So if there are some gaps or some improvement scope, right? So those areas would be taken care by the trainer to help individuals improve on those aspects,
Yes, sir.
right?
Okay.
So that is how this would be.
Okay,
Okay,
sir.
sure. So we are done. You can continue with your next class, and probably the remaining piece, which is forex, will take care in the next
Yes.
weekend.
And so one more thing, can you also inform Sakshi that that another class is left for us?
As okay, okay, yeah, I've informed her. She is already aware about it.
Okay.
Yeah, she knows we are almost hasn't done. Only one class is left.
Also, because
So
I got a mail and she said that this would be the first class, and since it's not completed, so that's why.
this is the first class.
Last class.
No, no, no. Last class, in a sense, no. You were not, as in, maybe she. I don't know. Maybe we can check on this. That's not a problem.
Yes, sir. Yeah, sir.
Uh,
It's okay.
yeah, no worries. Okay,
Okay,
sure.
sir.
So take care,
Thank you.
and we'll see. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Welcome.